Celebrity Podcast, the trend that refuses to die. We'll talk about it a little bit more in just a second here. Alright, so here's the thing. Celebrity podcasts have been a thing for at least a couple years now, but they're starting to really take off. You're starting to see more and more pop up because there's definitely a market and an interest from some people to hear from these celebrities, usually based on nostalgia. Usually celebrities who are on old TV shows or old movies, talking about those old TV shows and movies. That is a draw because people want to know the meat and potatoes of the behind the scenes. That's what draws people. They want to have that nostalgic experience. They want to see how these people have aged and so on and so forth. It's a weird fascination we as a culture have with this sort of thing. But it is still a trend. And I think it is starting to become oversaturated, much like guys like Tim Dillon predicted. I was watching an episode of his podcast and he was talking about, he was doing kind of a bit, but it was more serious, where he was saying these people are going to just flood the podcast space and they're going to ruin it for everybody else, and it's going to become about all sorts of what they can plug and all of their major corporate sponsors and all. He went on a whole rant about it that I thought was great. Anyways, here's my take. I'm not one of those people who hates celebrities, but I don't love them either. I'm in between. It just depends on who it is, and none of us really know these people. We don't know them in depth, and they don't know us. And that's part of the problem, is they live in a bubble separated from the rest of us. And some people really desperately want to peek inside that bubble. I've seen a peek inside that bubble, and I could care less. It's one of the reasons why I started series like this. Hollywood doesn't respect you. It's because not only does the industry not respect you and itself, but the celebrities in most cases don't respect you, or themselves, or the industry. It's just one massive cesspool of sin, evil, and disrespect, with a couple of good people in between. So it's just a mess, but people are fascinated by that mess. They're fascinated by that train wreck, and so they gravitate onto celebrities, and there's a lot of celebrity worship still, unfortunately. That's why we ended up with influencers as some of the newest celebrities of the age, which I think is ridiculous. Some people might even call me an influencer, even though I don't get any of the pull to be an influencer. But regardless, that's who the celebrity is now. It's not the TV star or the movie star or the music star. Well, it's still the music star. Taylor Swift is. She basically rules the freaking world. But regardless, there is an interest and there is a market. As much as I wish there wasn't. I really wish there wasn't, because honestly, who cares? Who cares? These people live in a bubble. Most people don't understand. They're like, oh, they're just like me, and this is how I can connect with them and understand that they're just like me. No, they're not. Only a handful of them are just like you, because they never stopped being an average person. They didn't go out when they got famous and buy a house in the Hollywood Hills or wherever they like to buy now. They didn't put themselves in a bubble separated from other people. They went back and interacted with their same friends and same family as when they left to go to the cesspool that is known as Los Angeles. They kept themselves grounded. Guys like Jay Leno or Tim Allen or James Woods or Pat Sajak is one of my favorites, and he's getting ready to leave Wheel of Fortune soon. Guys and gals who are grounded. There are a couple of them, but they're not many, because a lot of kids are now brought up with fame and fortune. And I don't care what they have to say. I just don't, because I know the bubble they live in, and it is a vapid, narcissistic, and frankly, stupid bubble. Now, I'm partially quoting Jay Leno from Dr. Phil's podcast here, which, say what you want about Dr. Phil. Alright, normally I don't even listen to his podcast, but I stumbled across the episode Jay Leno, because I like Jay Leno. And I love how Jay Leno just completely called it out. Because Jay Leno has interviewed almost every celebrity under the sun in his time as a talk show host. And he talked about how stupid some of them are. He didn't call anybody by name because he didn't want to insult anybody. But he just basically said, look, there are people who are so disconnected. He was telling a story about a guy who wanted to buy a new car, and Jay suggested a Ferrari. And he said, yeah, but everybody has a Ferrari. And Jay Leno was so aghast at that statement because he knew it was so far from the truth. He told me, he said, first of all, don't ever say that. There's some people who've never even seen a Ferrari. Why would you ever say that? And he said, it's just such a stupid bubble. And I agree with him. So why do we want to look into this bubble of celebrity? because we want to justify that they're still human. We want to humanize them. We know they're humans, but they're humans who are living with a lot of privileges that the rest of us don't have, and a lot of access that the rest of us don't have. And a lot of them are miserable because they live with all of these vices, and they're put on pedestals that human beings are not supposed to be put on. So there's constant pressure. There are problems with being a celebrity. There are things to feel bad about, but you choose that when you want to be in that industry. When you want to be an actor, a singer, whatever, you choose all of the things that come with it. Unfortunately, there are consequences to fame. We are not meant to be famous, you know. And I don't do this to be some sort of influencer or some sort of famous person. I do this because I like to talk. That's it. I do this because it's fun to talk about different things and to get conversations going. I don't do this to be one thing or another. I do this just because there's stuff on my mind, and I don't have a lot of folks to talk to, so I talk to the camera. Hi, camera. Anyways, it's one of those things where I don't hate every celebrity podcast. There's a lot of them I couldn't care less about, and I'm going to be careful about naming names because internet circles kind of, you know, circle around. But one of the ones that I do like is the Lawrence brothers. I think their podcast is good. Their best episodes are when they're talking to each other. Sometimes they'll bring on bigger celebrities or celebrities from the past, people they've worked with. Sometimes they'll bring in outside people that are doing something they're fascinated with. And those episodes are okay, but the stuff when they're together is the best. Because when you get celebrities, I don't particularly care about hearing more about the Hollywood bubble. I just don't. Even when they're talking about it, and they probably talk about it better than most people, I just don't care. I zone out. I'm done. But I've always loved the Lawrence brothers. I thought they're cool guys, and they really are more down to earth because they're sort of disconnected from the industry, even though they're still in it. You know, they're not as big as they once were, even though many of us still remember them. Brotherly Love was one of my favorite sitcoms of all time as a kid. I really loved it. But it flows naturally because we're just listening to what would be their average conversations, and I think that's what works. That's what works for Joe Rogan. That's what works for guys like Tim Dillon. That's what works for any of the better, more well-known podcasters and content creators out there, is when they have authentic conversations with each other. It's not about fame. It's about, you know, it's just average stuff that people can relate to. I think that works far better. And maybe that's not a popular opinion, but that's kind of how I approach it. Whereas I listen to some of these other celebrity podcasts, and they're all about just vapid, narcissistic, just... Like, I was listening to a podcast about, and I won't say who it is, but it was about an old show. It was stars from an old show, and they were going over the old episodes, and I thought, yeah, this is fun. This is cool, seeing them reminisce. And then they started looking at a certain aspect of the show. The show was from the 90s, and they said, well, that comes across as kind of homophobic and something to do with gender. And I had to pause and collect myself, because I'm like, why did I expect any different? Here I am enjoying this podcast, enjoying their breakdown. And of course they have to slow everything to a crawl to make it about some sort of political stance. To just say, well, you can't do that today. That's horribly inappropriate today. And it took me out of the whole experience. It took me out of all the nostalgia. It took me out of everything. And that's the stuff that pisses me off about celebrity podcasts, because the bubble can't help but find its way into the conversation because they're still in that freaking ridiculous Los Angeles bubble. When they get out of that bubble, they start talking about real world, real life, and then past experiences with acting and that's all fine. When they try to draw it into modern day, more Hollywood progressive, quote unquote, politics, that's when I just lose my mind. Because like anything else, it's like, I just want something neutral. I want something that isn't pulling one way or the other. If I want to listen to a political podcast, there's a number of them I can, for any number of politics that I prescribe to. I'm going to you for a disconnect from that. And I can't be disconnected, because Hollywood is like this with progressive politics. That bubble is just, it's completely tied to the hip. And I can't stand it. I just can't stand it. Because all I want is a simple escape. You know? I know I talk about wokeness and all that other stuff a lot on this channel, and just because I'm not for that. Because I'm for neutrality. I'm for, if you've got a political stance, just live it out, okay? If you're left or right, just live it. Don't preach it. Don't go on social media and preach it. And I have preached it before, but then I stopped because I'm like, what's the point? What is the honest point? I'm only preaching to the choir. I'm only preaching to people who agree with me. If I preach anything, it's going to be the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't need to be preaching politics. I'm done with the political side of the culture war as time goes on. Just vote how you're going to vote. Let that be it. The country will do what it does. If it sinks, it sinks. It's gonna be destroyed one day anyway. So, who cares? Honestly, who cares? Just hold your stances, just vote accordingly, and then just whatever. But with these celebrities, it always finds its way in. I'm listening to a podcast wanting to know about shows and some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, and then they always try to bring in something about modern-day Hollywood bubbleisms, for lack of a better term, and it's just stupid. I can't stand it. I would rather hear about some of the more upbeat, positive, less divisive stuff that's out there. And I think that's one of the things that hurts a lot of celebrity podcasts. And very few people are calling it out, especially on YouTube, because you got all the filtered comments where nobody can ever say anything negative. And I've got that on. So for people who go, oh, why did he delete my comments? I probably didn't. But the way that I've got my comments set up, if you say something that's just horribly disrespectful or mean, YouTube will automatically go after it. I've got my comments filtered because I don't want to have to deal with people who are just over the top, and it is what it is. But with these celebrities, when they start getting political, nobody calls them out and they say, "Hey, can we put that on the back seat so we can all have a good time here and not be so divisive?" But nobody does that because it's getting to where you can't do that, and that's, I think, what hurts the celebrity podcast trend, really, and that's what's gonna hurt it. Not only that, but it's gonna get lazy. Because it's just going to get, oh, well, we're going to get our friends together and we're just going to have a fun conversation about the industry. It's like, I don't really care about the industry at large. I care about a lot of what you did or what your guest did. But beyond that, I don't need to hear how, I don't need to hear about more of the Me Too movement. I don't need to hear more about the glass ceiling. I don't need to hear about that stuff. All right? Yeah, I know you think I need to hear about that, but I really, really don't. I truly, honestly don't. I would rather just hear about that's why I love the Lawrence Brothers podcast, because aside from when they bring on a couple guests, they don't engage in that much, and I think that's fine. They just reminisce. They talk about everything under the sun. They're all high energy, except for Andy. I don't know what's going on with him, but they just have this nice chemistry together, and everything just flows. It's fun conversation. It's engaging. But if it ever gets off track, if they ever bring in somebody that kind of derails that, it becomes noticeable, it's not their fault. It's just the nature of podcasting and podcast guests. But overall, I think celebrity podcasts, the trend is, I don't think it's going to last. I think the influencers are going to outlast the celebrities because they already are. The people who are making stuff on YouTube and TikTok, because the celebrities are trying to go everywhere the influencers are so they can keep the same momentum as the influencers. They can't. That's the sad reality, is that the influencers are here to stay. And I wish it wasn't true either. I can't stand influencers. I can't stand influencer culture because it's just more vapid narcissism. It's just a beautiful woman just showing herself off to the world and getting hundreds and thousands of followers and all of this money. It's not even effort anymore. Back in the day, celebrities used to have talent in order to get attention. Now it's just, you look good, you're the right gender, you're the right age, you're the right whatever. Whereas even earlier influencer culture was talent-based. It was merit-based, and now it's just based on some form of vapid narcissism and looks and just stupidity like that. So I do think this trend eventually will dry up. I don't think it's going to go to the extreme where they're going to take over and destroy podcasting, but they're definitely trying to break into influencer circles. I've noticed this, and some of them it'll work. It'll work for guys like the Lawrence Brothers as long as they stay humble about it, which they seem to be. Knock on wood in case that changes. But the ones that are just completely out to lunch, they're still in that Hollywood bubble, it's not going to work for them. They're going to find a small audience maybe, but eventually they'll quit. And they'll go back to doing... They're always going to be doing work of some sort because they're still connected in that industry. And their podcast will give them more of a presence, and then their agents will come up and be like, hey, we got all this work lined up because so-and-so saw your podcast and was reminded that you're still a thing. So I don't think those people will make it. I think the future is still independent content creators, whether you want to call them influencers or whatever. I think this trend is just going to come and go, and every once in a while you'll see it. They'll do it for a little while, then they'll go back to doing whatever. It's like YouTube. I mean, you had guys like Will Smith and Brie Larson and Jack Black doing YouTube, and they all kind of quit. They all went back to just doing, they started getting regular work again because they were doing stuff on YouTube. They're like, hey, you're still viable. So I don't think they're going to be full-time YouTubers. And Josh Peck even, he's doing a podcast now. He was doing YouTube, now he's transitioned over to doing a podcast more or less full-time. I don't know if he still makes content or not on a YouTube level, but they're trying to break into the influencer space because they see that as the future, and it is the future. The future isn't television and film anymore in terms of fame and attention. It is being on the internet. And I want to make it very clear, I don't do this for fame and attention. If I did, I wouldn't look nearly as ugly as I do. I'm just doing it for fun. Alright, I'm doing it to self-deprecate. I'm doing it to enjoy myself, to basically waste a whole bunch of time. This is a gigantic waste of time, but it's a fun waste of time. Just like playing video games or watching TV or reading comic books used to be. It's just a fun waste of time, and it's fun to share it with all of you, whoever shows up. So, those are my thoughts on the celebrity podcast trend. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. As always, try to be respectful with it. Whether you agree or disagree, maybe you could care less. Most people could care less about celebrities. That's my default, is I could care less, but I think people are worried about the trend who want to get into podcasting because they're like, okay, well, I'm going to get overtaken by, if Taylor Swift starts a podcast tomorrow, forget about it. I mean, everybody's going to listen to it. Everybody and their grandma's going to listen to it, and it's just going to take off like a rocket ship, and nobody else will be able to break into the sphere. I think that's what people are worried about, but I don't think they need to. I think people are willing to find the type of content they want to find, like with YouTube, with TikTok, with whatever. They're willing to find the content that they want. If that's celebrity, so be it. If that's just your average Joe doing things that they specialize in, so be it. So, that's my stance. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa TV. Remember, Hollywood does not respect you. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.